will cut this hair today. You, this witch.
She's a witch.
Please, I'm begging you.
My name is Aisha. I was born and raised in Abra, a small village tucked between two hills where the red soil was rich and the river never dried. We were a proud people. Hardworking. Close. But there was one thing about us that outsiders always noticed before anything else: not our farms, not our music, not our festivals. It was our heads. Every single person in Abra was bald. Men, women, children, elders. Not from sickness. Not from age. It was simply how we were made, how our parents were made, and their parents before them. A smooth head in Abra meant you belonged. It was identity. It was pride. It was the one thing that made us feel chosen. That was why, when Adiz was born, the whole village stopped breathing. She came into the world on a quiet Thursday morning, the daughter of Momangozi and the farmer Emeka, and she arrived with a full head of thick, dark, coiling hair. The midwife stepped back from the mat. The women who were present went silent. Her own mother held her at arm's length for a long moment before pulling her close, and even then the room carried a heaviness that no one dared to name out loud. I was 7 years old when Adiz was born. I remember my mother coming home that evening with something strange sitting on her face. Not quite fear. Not quite disgust. Something between the two that adults wear when they encounter a thing they do not have words for. Adiz grew up beautiful in a way that unsettled people. Her hair grew thick and long, and when the wind moved through it, it caught the last light of the evening sun like something almost sacred. I was fascinated by her. I would watch her from across the compound the way children watch things that are both wonderful and confusing at the same time. But the village did not see wonder. The village saw difference, and in Abra, difference was the first cousin of suspicion. The whisper started before she could walk. At the water well. In the market. Behind compound walls when people thought no one was listening. They said her hair was a mark of darkness. That Emeka must have offended a spirit and this child was sent as punishment. That nothing good could grow from a girl who looked nothing like her own people. Some of the older women refused to greet Momangozi. Some children were forbidden from playing near Adiz. Even the elders held a formal meeting about her when she was barely 2 years old, as if she had committed a crime simply by being born with something they did not have. Her parents loved her fiercely and quietly. They kept her close and tried to shield her from the words. But you cannot shield a child from a whole village. The words always find a way through. By the time Adiz was 16, her hair had grown past her shoulders. It was the most magnificent thing I had ever seen in my life, thick ropes of dark coiling hair that she sometimes wore loose and sometimes braided with thread, dried flowers, and small beads from the market. She walked through Abra with her head up, not out of arrogance but out of something quieter than that. A kind of stubborn peace. Like she had decided long ago that she would not shrink herself for people who had already made up their minds about her. That peace is what made them hate her more. When people decide someone is beneath them and that person refuses to behave like it, something ugly wakes up inside them. The jealousy in Abra shifted from whispers to something with teeth. Women who had ignored her for years suddenly could not stop talking about her. Men who had never looked at her twice began making comments about how unnatural she was. Young girls who secretly admired her hair said cruel things in groups because cruelty in a group feels safer than admiration alone. Then the chief called a meeting. I was not invited, but I heard everything through my aunt who sat close to the chief's compound wall. The elders said Adiz's hair was the reason the last harvest had been poor. They said it was why 2 children in the village had fallen ill that season. They said her difference was a spiritual contamination, that the gods of Abra required uniformity, and that as long as one person among them carried something foreign on their body, the whole village would suffer. They spoke about her like she was a disease. The decision they reached that night was the one I already told you about at the beginning of this story. They came for her on a Saturday morning when the sun was already high and hot. 6 of them. They dragged her from her mother's compound while Mama Ngozi screamed and her father Emeka tried to fight them off until 3 men pinned him to the ground. They brought Adis to the center of the village square where the whole of Abra had gathered. Some people looked away. Most did not. They held her down while she screamed. 6 grown men and women, pinning a young girl to the ground in the middle of the village square, and they shaved her hair while the whole of Abra watched and said nothing. The razor moved fast and without mercy. She stopped screaming at some point and just wept, quietly, with her face pressed against the red earth. When it was over, she looked like the rest of us. Smooth-headed. Belonging. But her eyes were something I had never seen before in a human face, not anger, not even sadness. Just a deep and terrible emptiness, like something inside her had gone somewhere very far away and had no intention of coming back. They threw her hair into the fire. People cheered. I did not cheer. But I did not speak either. And silence, I have learned, is just a quieter way of taking sides. 3 days later, the first person collapsed. It was Mama Chioma, one of the women who had held Adis down. She woke up in the night burning with fever, and by morning she could not stand. By the second day, 6 more people had fallen ill, all of them elders who had been present at the meeting. By the end of the first week, nearly half the village was sick. A sickness nobody had seen before. No rash. No cough. Just a deep heavy fever that drained the strength from a person's body like water draining from a broken pot, and a darkness behind the eyes that made the sick ones look lost, the same emptiness I had seen in Adis' face after they shaved her head. The herbalist tried everything he knew. Nothing worked. People sent for healers from neighboring villages. They came, looked at the sick, and left quietly without offering much hope. One old woman from 2 villages away took one look at the situation and asked a single question that silenced the entire compound. She asked what the village had done recently that it had never done before. Nobody answered her out loud. But everyone knew. Adis had left Abra the morning after they shaved her head. She and her parents packed what they could carry and walked out before sunrise. Nobody stopped them. Nobody apologized. The village had gotten what it wanted and felt no need for further conversation. Finding her took 2 weeks. The chief sent messengers to 3 different villages before they finally located her living with a distant relative of her mother in a town far from Abra. By then 11 people had died. The chief himself was bedridden. So they sent the elders who were still strong enough to walk, and they sent me too, because someone remembered that Aisha had never cheered that day and perhaps Adis might be willing to listen to me. I will never forget the moment I saw her again. She was sitting outside in a small courtyard, braiding the hair of a young girl from that household. Her own hair had not grown back yet, it was a short soft covering, barely there, but she sat with the same quiet dignity she had always carried. When she looked up and saw the elders behind me, her face did not change. No anger. No surprise. Just that stillness that had always lived in her eyes. The elders spoke first. They apologized. They listed the names of those who had died. They described the sickness spreading through Abra and the fear that had taken root where pride used to live. They said they had been wrong. They said they were begging. One elder, the same man who had stood beside the chief while she was held down, lowered himself to his knees in the dirt and wept like a child. Adis was quiet for a long time after they finished. Then she said something I have carried with me every day since. She said she forgave them. Not for their sake but for her own, because she had decided long ago that she would not let Abra live inside her chest for the rest of her life. She said unforgiveness was just another way of letting people who had already hurt you continue to do so. She said she had made her peace with what happened the same night she left. But she also said she would not return. Not out of bitterness. Not out of punishment. She simply said that Abra was a place where she had never truly been allowed to exist, and she had found a place where she could, and she intended to stay there. She wished the village healing. She meant it. But she did not owe them her presence just because they had finally found the decency to ask for it. The elders returned to Abra without her. I stayed 1 extra day because I needed to sit with what I had just witnessed. A young woman who had every reason to rage, choosing something harder and quieter than rage. Choosing peace without pretending the wound had not been real. The sickness in Abra broke slowly over the following weeks. People recovered. The village survived. But it was never quite the same after that. The cheering and the fire and the razor had shown everyone what they were capable of, and that knowledge is not something you simply put down and walk away from. I still live in Abra. I never cheered that day, but I never spoke either, and I carry that with me. I think about Adis often. I think about her sitting in that courtyard braiding a little girl's hair, unbothered and whole, while the village that tried to break her was on its knees begging the sky for mercy. She forgave them. She just never came back. And honestly, looking back at everything we did to her, I am not sure we deserved her return. I am not sure we ever deserved her at all.